Hi, it's Paul Ratchford. Today we're gonna look through some interesting high stakes hands I played. One of them's a 5-10 euro game here that you see going on right now, and then we're gonna get to some other ones. One's at 25-50 euro, and there's an interesting 10-20 pot. Anyhow, so in this hand, playing against a few regs here, and I pick up pocket jacks out of the small blind, and I'm playing about 100 and 180 big blinds deep here. And this reg here is a pretty tough reg. He four bets a fair amount, and in this situation, I just thought that if I three bet him here, he really has the opportunity to four bet back with a pretty wide range, and it's going to put me in a very difficult spot. Five betting jacks out of position, or five bet shoving, or for 180 big blinds just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I decided to kind of I figured it would be better to take a different route, and I'm going to end up going with the call here. And something I like about that is it disguises my strength a little bit. He's going to look at my three bet number, somewhere around like 10%, 11%, whatever, and he's going to think that I probably three-bet aces, kings, queens, jacks, all those hands. And if I can kind of throw him off a little bit with on certain boards, if I flop big, he could definitely think I'm putting a move on and not really give me as much credit as he should. So. And so you see here, I just go with the smooth call, and the flop's interesting. So flop's 5-2-2, all low cards, and again, this player raises very frequently off the button. You can't see it here, but he has he has about a 55% raise from the button number. So I'm really not giving him much credit here at all. He also continuation bets the flop all the time, around 80%. So really, if you're raising 55-60% of hands off the button, and then you're con betting 80%, obviously most of the time you don't have a whole heck of a lot. So I've been playing back at this guy. We had a bit of a history. I've been playing back on this guy a fair amount, and one of the interesting things is when you start. So in the previous video, when I talked about the HUD, I talked about how some of you guys could start to just call and then raise the flops on people. Well, it works pretty well, but one thing you do have to watch out for is when players adapt, and especially if they have position on you and they feel like you're just calling their blind steals and then raising the flops an awful lot, they're really going to start calling light, and they're maybe going to start floating and stuff. So that's something that this player had. I don't know exactly what he was doing because I hadn't seen the cards shown down a lot, but he'd been calling a number of my flop raises. So that was kind of in the whole thought process of why I slow played my jacks too, for just this kind of a board. And so here I check raise fairly strong, and to 130, and the thing about this is when he calls, I'm not really putting him on a monster. He definitely could have sixes, sevens, eights, nines, tens, even kind of any five, I would think. Also, it's possible he has like a 3-4. I doubt he would raise it, but maybe like a 4-3 suited. It's kind of unlikely. And obviously, there's a bunch of kind of just overcards that he could have, like a Jack 10, Ace Jack, King Queen, those kind of things. So Ace King potentially. So anyhow, that's a pretty wide range. But I'm check raising for value here, absolutely, and it is going to put me in a little bit of a tricky spot because I'm building a pot out of position. And here on the turn, you got a couple options. Obviously, you can continue firing for value, but I get the sense that he might fold to a pretty strong bet here a number of times, and I think I might get more value just checking. I like this card still. So what you're going to see here is I end up going with the check. Definitely could continue to fire this, but then I don't necessarily get him to start bluffing, and I do think that he's going to bluff a fair amount, especially, if he calls my check raise on the flop, say with an ace queen or any overcards or sixes or something, on the turn he's going to start. He's going to bet for sure. So I still love my jacks here, and I think that's probably the best way to go here. There's not really a whole lot I have to protect against in the way of draws, which is kind of the nice thing about the way this board came down with rainbow paired board. I suppose it's also possible he does have me crushed here with like ace deuce suited or something like that, and that is gonna happen, but I don't think you can really worry about that too much at this point. And so anyhow, I go ahead and check there, and sure enough, he does fire out, and he fires out, which is pretty expected, and he fires out pretty strong here, 200, and I think at this point, you have a couple options. Obviously, you can go with the check raise, which would be okay, except for the pot is pretty big. So you're talking about a pot of 500 now when you add in his bet, 510. So you're talking 50 big blinds, and you definitely want to protect those pots a lot of the time. But again, here I really don't think I have to protect against too much, and I do think that. I do think there's a lot of fives in his range. I think that he has just like 6-5 suited and 7-5 suited, and maybe a king 5 and a queen 5 and possibly even an ace 5. So I would so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go ahead and just call, and I think that's the best way to extract the most value. Problem with that is, and we'll see, it does get interesting here on the river. Up until now, it's been relatively standard-ish hand, but with the river card coming down, which is going to be an ace here, and we'll get to that in a second. It really does change things significantly. So anyhow, I go ahead and call, and there's the ace, and it's the ace of hearts too, which is interesting because I'm wondering whether at this point I'm wondering if a backdoor flush draw might have hit, and if there's any way that I can see him having two hearts as well. I'm also faced with a couple options here. Do I, now that the ace is hit, which obviously isn't a pretty looking card for me, and the pot's really big, I'm out of position. What are my options? Should I maybe block bet this river? That was definitely something that went through my head, because I'm not loving this as much anymore. And I could block bet the river. It might even work out for value. He might hero tank call with some kind of pocket pair like nines potentially. I mean, it would be a tough call for him to make, but theoretically that's possible. Anyhow, I think that's one way to go, but I don't think it's the best way to go. The premise, the whole way through this hand, I've really thought that I'm going to check raise him on the flop, and then I'm just going to kind of give him some rope to hang himself, because he's just calling too often when I do a big check raise to really have me beat, especially if I trick him with a big hand, like slow playing a big pocket pair like pocket jacks. And the ace does hit some of his range, but at the end of the day, here, he's gonna have to bet. He's gonna have to bet pretty big, I think, for me to fold. And so sure enough, I do go ahead and check there, and what you'll see here is he bets 610 on the river, which is a big bet, but it's not really the kind of bet that I think I can fold to. If he goes ahead, maybe if he jams the river or something, then I mean obviously that's kind of weird for one thing, but it's also yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that one, but anyhow, with a bet here where I'm getting 2 to 1 on my money, and I have had a game plan from the beginning. I think that hits some of his range. I still think I'm crushing a lot of his range. I don't think there's any way that I can really get away from this. I still think he has a lot of fives. That now his thought process is probably that maybe I had like nines, right? So I check raise the flop with nines, and then I check to him. I check on the turn and when the 10 hits because I'm a little unsure with my nines, and he bets out, but I still call, and then I check again on the river, and he's thinking maybe with an ace down now you can push me off a hand like nines or push me off a hand like eights or sevens, depending on what he has, and of course we don't know yet. But say he had a five, right, and then he thought that I had a hand like sixes, sevens, eights, nines, etc. Then those would be the kind of hands that he might be trying to get me off, or maybe he even thinks that I have a five of some kind. That's possible, though I doubt. He puts a lot of fives in my range, calling his raise from the button. And of course, there's really no way that I have a two here. It just doesn't really add up. My VPIP is around 20, and doesn't make sense. So I definitely don't think he puts me on a two. And sure enough, so I make the call, and he shows 8-5, which is kind of definitely right in the range that I put him on, and I think this is kind of a good example of how mixing up your play can really pay off sometimes, and that it's not always just about I have jacks or queens or whatever it is, tens, free betting, but adding some balance to our games, and once you start bluffing with a hand like, say, just whatever, you're just airing the flop with flop raises, then you need to add balance, and you need to start slow playing some big pairs too sometimes. So anyhow, moving on now to a pretty big game that I was playing in. And this is a 25-50 euro game, so kind of like a 30-70 US dollar game or whatever. And this is an interesting kind of an interesting situation. It's just an example of how you can mix up the play. And here I'm playing with a bunch of regs, and we have the fish or weaker player at the table is Sandra JSB, and I've been playing for a few hands, playing very tight, just kind of blinding away a little bit. I'm bought in for 4,000 euros here, and basically I hadn't played a hand for a couple of orbits, and here it folds around to me on the button, and I have the 3-10, and there's a couple of kind of difficult regs in the blind. They're both solid players. So normally this probably wouldn't be a hand that you would want to be jumping in there and throwing raises down or whatever with. But I just thought that I could use my image to steal with a raise or with a 4-bet. And in this situation, I actually am kind of going more for the 4-bet. And when I do that, especially here, so they see me playing tight after, say, 16, 20 hands. They know it's 25-50 euro game because I play with these guys at lower levels, and these guys do play all the way down to like 2-4, and then they run up sometimes when there's weaker players around and whatnot. But they definitely recognize that this is a big game, and they'll notice that right now I'm playing tight, and they're probably thinking that okay, so I'm playing tight, and it folds around to me on the button. So here, he's just going to throw a raise in, and then I need to do to take the money from him is 3-bet, because he's really not going to play back at me with nothing at this high a game. And these guys both have around 10%, 8 to 10% 3-bet numbers. So you guys can't see that, but those are their stats. And so anyhow, I thought that I could kind of induce a 3-bet from one of these guys. And I thought the best way to do that, especially with my stack size, because I'm only playing 80 big blinds here, and I thought that if I make my raise like 150, they're probably going to re-raise me to like 500 or 550 or something like that. And then if I 4-bet, it's going to have to be really big. And this was a big game for me, so I'd rather 4-bet a little smaller actually. So if I want to 4-bet smaller, and if I want to kind of induce a raise, the perfect way to do that is just to raise small. So I just raise to 105. And of course, what we'll see here is there's the 3-bet, and so nothing's really changed here. I have 310 offsuit and I'm being re-raised, but besides that fact, which isn't generally an ideal situation, I don't actually think that we're in that bad of a situation here. Like, I actually so right now there's 350. 405, and then or 455, sorry, and then so we're at 480 in the pot, and I think that I've decided I'm going to go ahead with this 4-bet, and the question is kind of what's the amount. So I think you just make the amount like somewhere between kind of 900ish, around 900 maybe to 1,000, 950, something like that. And if we make it that, it essentially has to work 2 out of 3 times to be even money. So that's and in this scenario, the way this hand is played out, I think that it probably works significantly more than 2 out of 3. In fact, this 3-bet is pretty fishy from the big blind. And I think once I 4-bet, he's gonna have to give me a lot of credit here, especially since I've been playing tight. It's the first hand I raise, and then now I'm 4-betting. It's a big game, so he probably thinks I'm playing a little tighter than normal. And I would say that obviously if he has like an ace king or something, it's going to be an insta shove back on me. But I don't think I think he's going to struggle to 4-bet or to reshove 10s, say, or or jacks or something like that. But jacks he definitely might because it's in the blinds here, but he's definitely going to have to think about jacks. So the auto shoves are kind of queens, kings, aces, and ace king, which is a relatively small number of hands, and definitely smaller range than he's 3-betting here significantly, and he's 3-betting a fair amount. So anyhow, yeah, I 4-bet it to 980. So it's basically I risked, I'm risking my initial raise was 105, so it's about 870 more to win the 450 or whatever. So it's pretty much the 2-to-1 that I was talking about. And sure enough, he does fold here, which is not really unexpected given the dynamic of the table. So I think that's something that's important when you are 4-betting too, or thinking about 4-betting, is that you just kind of like have a plan, understand all the different elements at play. So anyhow, that was kind of like just an interesting 4-bet with a pretty garbage hand at a big game. So moving on now, excuse me, to a 10-20 euro game that I was playing, and this is kind of an interesting hand. It's I'm playing at a game here. It's not the best table, kind of all regs actually, and I pick up pocket aces, early position, and it's pretty standard raise here, and what happens isn't ideal. I get three callers, and they're all good players, and they're all pretty aggressive, which means that it can put me in some tough spots post flop here. I'm really only getting like three big blinds in pre flop, so then and it's going to be tough to get away from if they flop big. So I do want to be cautious with my pocket aces in this kind of a scenario, and obviously one of these guys has probably got a pocket pair. Someone else is probably playing suited connectors, and who knows? Maybe there's like an ace jack out there, or an ace 10 or something like that. And so anyhow, the flop comes down jack 3-2, which I think is pretty safe. I do think these guys would 3-bet jacks most of the time. So really, if they could theoretically have a set of threes or twos, which is going to be a big problem for me if they do, because I'm probably going to go broke if on this kind of board. I'm definitely going to go broke if they raise me on the flop at least. So it goes check to me, and obviously this is pretty standard still. Just I'm leading out here 3/4 of the pot, and with a flush draw board and it being set up like that, there's no way I'm going to check this or anything. So, especially with only one player behind me who might bet it and give me the opportunity to check raise. So I go ahead and bet, and unfortunately I get the call behind me, which I never like to see, because I want position, and this can get tricky when someone calls behind, and then the other two guys fold, which is good. So we are at least playing heads up now. But it's right now, I think that he probably has a lot of flush draws right here, and then there's a whole bunch of jacks that he could have. Theoretically, he could have a hand like, I don't know, like say pocket eights and just not want to fold the flop. But I think like a jack 10's more likely, or a king jack or a queen jack suited, or one of those kind of hands. Or you could have some kind of a 8-7 suited and flop the diamond draw. And a lot of good players these days, they really like to play their flush draws aggressively, and they like to play especially ace high flush draws aggressively. But sometimes with the lower flush draws, they are more likely to just make a call. So I could definitely see a lower flush draw being possible here, and this guy has a VPIP of about 30%, which means he does play those suited connectors too. I didn't mention that earlier, but yeah, that's kind of an important piece of information, because if you see a guy with a with a VPIP of say like 15% or 16%, they're not really, even off the button, they're not really calling like 6-5s and 7-6s, 8-7s and things like that. So, but this guy definitely is, and because of that, on the turn here, the king comes off, and this is this isn't. I'm not really too concerned that I'm beat at this point. I think the only hand that I really see having improved significantly is the king jack, and so I thought he had those flush draws like I was talking about. So I thought I'd go with the check and then see if I could check raise them all in on the turn, because what happens is a lot of the regs, they basically, the idea is that he's thinking, okay, I let into 3 people there on the flop, so it looks like I am actually pretty strong. Like maybe I have an ace, jack, queens, aces, something like that. It's a big hand. So he's like, I can just wait until the turn, and then maybe I can still get it in against him, as opposed to just flipping a coin all in for 4,000 euros on the flop here. And he has position too, which makes him even more likely to just kind of make a call or whatever. Now, if he had the jack, like a queen jack or something like that, he might check behind too, thinking like it was odd that I checked when the king came off, because that would probably help a bunch of my range. But yeah, I mean, I think at this point he's really probably putting me on like an ace jack, thinking maybe I got scared on the turn, or maybe I have like queen jack and didn't like the turn, or I have pocket queens or something like that. And I didn't like the river here. I didn't like the diamond. And a big factor at play here too is that this guy's a very good player and fully capable of bluff raising the river on me, which I just and I just checked there, and normally you would just probably value here, like I would be valuing, in case he has that jack or whatever, like 310 or something in that kind of range, kind of like he bet here. But against this player, I think that's a pretty risky line to take, because that 8 of diamonds is a good card to kind of throw a bluff down. And I doubt he thinks I have a flush draw, because a lot of guys, who play the kind of numbers that I do would be double barreling flush draws in that situation. So he if I bet that river, he can pretty safely kind of bluff raise me around the pot or whatever. And that just puts me in a really bad spot with my, not where I want to be at all with my aces. So, because he could easily have made the flush here too. So that, anyhow, so I don't mind the check here on the river. I'm really regretting not betting the turn. I kind of think that was, maybe a bit of a mistake. I should have just kept bombing away, but I didn't, and so you have to deal with that too. Just you're not always going to play every street perfectly, and sometimes you make like maybe a little bit of a mistake at some point, and I do think my logic was sound, that I could, maybe, or like the idea that I could maybe induce him to bluff, and then with a flush draw, and then check raise him, and so like he kind of has to fold. But it didn't go my way, and so now here we are on the river, and with this bet of 340, the problem with it, normally this would be a pretty standard call. It's a relatively small pot still, and I do make the call. But in retrospect, I really think that I'm just not winning this a whole lot on the river. Like, I think my hand, I think it's pretty obvious to him what I have, as in that I have a decent pair here, and I think and yet he's still valuing. So could he be valuing like an ace jack here? Possible, because he is aggressive. But it's far more likely he's valuing some kind of a flush here. He just puts me on queens. He puts me on ace jack. He puts me on like maybe even king queen or something. I don't know. If I air the flop into 3, that seems pretty unlikely actually. But yeah, it's just the 6-5 suited. It makes a whole lot of sense here. With that flop, the gut shot flush draw, he had a big draw. There's no real reason to raise if he raises me on the flop, he just potentially gets it in for a big flip. But there's no real reason for him when he has position to do that. So why not just call on the flop? And the turn comes down. I think he was worried that may have like that I had a big hand, and that like I wasn't going anywhere, and I might be waiting to check raise him. So I think the check behind's fine. He still has a ton of outs, good chance of picking up his card on the river, and some of them are pretty disguised. Like if that 4 comes off on the river, well, I probably value my aces, and then he raises, and now I'm really confused. So anyhow, I like the way he played the hand. And I'm not a huge fan of the way I played that hand, but yeah, it's just kind of an interesting hand there, at 10-20. So moving on again to another hand. Now this is actually gonna be a really really interesting hand that happened, and it starts off pretty slowly. But let me set the stage for you a bit, because it does pretty player specific here. So I'm playing about 230 big blinds deep at a 10-20 Euro game. So I have a lot of money at the table, like 4,700 euros or whatever. And the weaker player is this Paluk 7-7, and he's ran it up. He's been super hot. He's got like 11,500 euros. He's up a bunch of stacks. He's been killing everyone, and he's a tricky player. His VPIP is over 50, and he loves to pot bet. In fact, it's like the only betting button that he knows is the pot bet button. So when he's hitting, it's tough, because he pot bets draws, he pot bets bluffs, and he pot bets made hands. And that can get really frustrating when he's just making hand after hand. You just can't believe that he has it one more time. So anyhow, standard here. I raise ace jack suited off the button, and he calls out of the big blind. He has a very low fold to flop bet number. So that's a big part of the reason why I don't really think it makes any sense to con bet that low board. And he also check raises the flop a fair amount, so why not give myself that. I do have still 6 outs, so about a 12% chance of picking up an ace or jack on the turn. Plus there's I do have backdoor flush draw too, which is always a factor there on the flop. So I wouldn't mind seeing the turn here rather than getting pushed off on the flop. And so I check behind, and then on the turn, sure enough, he pot bets. And there's obviously there's a couple things that I can do here. I can fold because it's pot and I only have a flush draw, but I'm just never going to do that with these stack sizes and the potential implied odds here, etc. I'm already getting 2-1 on my money, and any jack could be good, any ace could be good. Obviously, any diamond from which gives me the nuts unless it pairs the board. So I'm definitely not folding. So the question is, do I call or do I raise here? And again, here I'm dealing with a tough player who does pot bet a lot, and because he pot bets so much that he folds a fair amount too when you raise. And an important thing is that very few players will 3-bet you on the turn. And if he pot bets here, if I raise him, I just don't see really any. First off, if I raise, there's a good chance he's going to fold, and then which would be great, because I just pick up the pot. And if he calls, that's okay too, because I have a ton of outs. And the other thing is, if he calls and then I hit, and he has a pretty big hand, I can potentially pick up a huge pot. And because there's not a tremendous risk here of him 3-betting the turn on me. I just think that there's no real reason to call. You might as well go with the raise. Try and pick up the pot with your ace high, the flush draw, whatever. And so I do go ahead here and raise it up, which I know nothing crazy, just basically 300. And the turn, and he calls, and the turn comes down a queen of diamonds, which is just absolutely dynamite for me, because I have the stone cold nuts, and sure enough, he leads into me, and of course it's pot, surprise. But so now we're looking great, and the question is just, how much do I raise here? I could, I could min raise theoretically, but I don't think that's a very wise thing. I could raise this to like 1700 or something like that, but I get the sense that he's actually, he's bluffing here a fair amount on a number of busted draws and things, because he's fully capable of calling the turn with a gut shot there, like a 9-8 or an 8-7, and then just bombing pot on the river as a bluff, and that's the kind of thing that I've seen him do a lot of. So anyhow, and he's also, he could have picked up a hand here, so, and he definitely could have picked up, say, what if he has picked up a backdoor flush? That's going to be really hard for him to raise, especially since I raised the turn, which should have kind of disguised my strength to him a little bit. And maybe if he has a low flush here and I raise the river, maybe he'll think that I'm valuing a set of tens or something like that, because he isn't the best player. And so I think he's either going to fold or call. And so a very big raise is in order. And I didn't want to just straight up push all in, because that I have seen some of these guys kind of put two and two together and figure that you really must have them beat at that point. So, but I did a huge raise, and this is 150 big bets on the river, and I think this is kind of the way to go. And at the time, he really went in the tank on this, and eventually he does call here. You'll see, and it doesn't show on the screen, but he has a small flush. He has like an 8 high flush or something like that, and I think this is kind of a good example of one of those times when you don't want to kind of undervalue your hand on the river, because there's a lot of situations where it doesn't matter what you raise, they're still going to call, or it doesn't matter what you bet, they're still going to call, and those are the kind of times when I want, I would like to see everyone thinking about maybe pot betting the river. It doesn't necessarily have to be a hand like this where you're raising the river, or whatever, but like maybe the guy just checks you and you really think he's either going to fold or call. It doesn't really matter what you bet. So just bomb pot or even over pot. That can be very very effective too. Just over betting the river, and sometimes you can make a pot pretty big pretty quickly, and this hand was checked on the flop, and it check on the flop, and it still ends up being 7,000 euros, which is incredible payoff for basically 170 big blinds or something. So and that all happened because of some good aggression on the turn, and really good example of great value there on the river. So anyhow, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the four big hands that we covered, and I just went back to the first hand again. But next time I'm going to do another video on a little lower stake video again, and bring back the HUD and talk some more about that kind of stuff. But till next time, good luck at the tables, everyone.